Like, we knew that, like, gay and lesbian were a thing, and, like, bisexual people exist. But nobody knew about, or at least I didn't, I certainly didn't know that trans people existed. Or that it was possible to not only be trans, but to thrive and have a happy life and have relationships and have children and just live a life.
You're listening to the Talking 20 podcast, where we're joined by fellow millennials to chat about how none of us know what we're doing, but we're all on our own unique journey to figure it out. We're your hosts, Bridget O'Rourke and Mary Margaret Courtney. Let's get started. Welcome to the very first episode of Talking 20. Mary and I are super excited to be releasing our first episode early in celebration of Pride Month. This is an episode that I recorded before Mary came on board the project with my close friend, Liam Jotham, who joins me to talk about his journey of being transgender in his 20s. This is a great educational episode touching on topics like what being transgender means, how to be a supportive friend, parent, and ally for somebody who is transgender. Liam talks about the process of coming out and how to ease the transition for others, and also offers advice for people struggling with the process of coming out. We cover all sorts of things, so let's dive in. So now I'm joined by my childhood best friend, Liam Jotham. Hi, Liam. How are you?
Hey, Bridget. How's it going? I'm good.
Good. So today we're going to talk about your journey of becoming transgender. Is that how you would say it? Becoming transgender? What is the correct terminology?
Well, you don't become trans. That sounds like Transformers, robots,
Okay, so what would I say then?
Just being trans.
Okay, being trans. So today we're going to talk about your journey of being transgender. But before we get into that, why don't you give a little bit of background on what being transgender means?
Okay. So for anyone that doesn't know what being transgender is, or being trans, just simply means you identify as the opposite gender from what you were assigned at birth. So
okay.
When you're born, the doctor looks between your legs and says, "Yep, it's a girl," and you in yourself feel that you're a boy. That's being trans. So the opposite of transgender is cisgender, which means your body parts that are ascribed to your gender match with how you feel.
And then what is non-binary?
Non-binary is you don't feel either male or female. Or sometimes it switches, or sometimes you feel both.
And you're brought up being the gender that you were assigned at birth.
Yes.
So what is the most common point in somebody's life that they would realize that they don't identify with their birth gender? I guess it's different for everybody?
There's this sort of idea that, if you don't know when you're 6 or 7 years old, then you're not trans. But I think for a lot of people, the realization doesn't come until much later. Whether they're in adolescence, whether they're starting puberty, whether they're in their 30s or 40s, and something just clicks and they go, "Oh, okay." There might be signs if you look back and go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense as to why this or why that or why I preferred this." But there's just sort of a disconnect between your body and your innate sense of self.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey of being transgender. When did you come out? How did you feel? Tell us a bit about that process for you.
It's funny to look back on that now because in my experience, it was a long, painfully slow process, mostly down to my own fear. We all know how awkward it is to be a 12-year-old going through puberty and adolescence and what that looks like.
Fun.
But it's also awkward having that disconnect from what is happening with your body and not necessarily feeling like that's 100% for you.
So is that how you felt when you were 12, that you didn't really identify with your body?
I was sort of indifferent. It's like, oh, okay, like this is happening and that's like fine and whatever. And yeah, I'll go and sit in on the sex ed classes with all the girls and that's fine. But like, I wanted to know what was happening with the boys. Like, I wanted to know, like, yeah, that's fine, and like these are my body parts, and I can label it, and like that's great, but like, what's happening in the other room? I want to know.
I mean, I think we all did. I wanted to know what was happening in the other room too, for different reasons.
Also, yes, but that's a different conversation. So I think there's a sort of disconnect where like, okay, like that's happening to my body and I was indifferent. But then to try and perform that gender was uncomfortable for me. Do you remember that time we went to the movies? I don't even remember what movie we went and saw, but we had those tank tops with like elastic push-up bras in them. And we wore like the same shirt.
Like workout shirts?
Over top, and we thought we were
for
like
12-year-olds?
No. They had like elastic as the bra support part. And we wore the same shirt over top because we thought we were hot shit. And we were going to the movies and being sexy at 12, 13.
I think maybe I do remember this, vaguely. So how did you feel then?
I remember feeling highly uncomfortable wearing that, but being like, yeah, I'm cool and hot shit, but this is really uncomfortable and not good for me.
So at that point, you didn't know why you were feeling that way, but, like you said earlier, you can kind of look back now and reflect and be like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't know why I was feeling that discomfort. It's beyond and bigger than the discomfort that comes with your body changing and with puberty and acne and all those wonderful things that come with adolescence. And I also remember buying my first blazer around the same time. And I remember this blazer so clearly.
Ah, yes, your blazers. You were always so dapper in your blazers.
Always. So I remember buying my first blazer, and it was, I think, at like H&M or one of those places. And the sleeves were always too long for me. It was a little bit too big. But I remember trying that on for the first time and going, yes, like this is it. This is what I want to wear. And my mom just sort of rolling with it. Now looking back at pictures, it's like, oh dear God, what are you thinking, you sweet baby? So just sort of feeling out what felt right and what didn't feel right. But I didn't know that there was a term for that, or I didn't have the language, or the exposure, or the role models that exist now for trans kids. To put a name to it.
Yeah, being transgender has become much more widely known and accepted now, whereas when we were in high school, we didn't even know that it existed. We didn't know that being transgender was a thing.
No, like we knew that like gay and lesbian were a thing.
Right.
And, like bisexual people exist.
Yeah.
But nobody knew about, or at least I didn't. I certainly didn't know that trans people existed, or that it was possible to not only be trans, but to thrive and have a happy life and have relationships and have children and just live a life.
Right? So walk us through this. At what point did you realize that you were transgender? And how long did it take you to accept that fact? And then what was the process of moving forward with it? How long did that take to start to tell people?
I think between the inkling of, oh yeah, like I just prefer pants over dresses, to the dawning and crippling fear and realization that came with, oh my God, like that's me. I would say like starting high school and then to my first year of university. The first year of university was that jump for me. But to come to the accepting part of that realization took a while too. And then to say that out loud to myself in the mirror was huge. But then to say that to the people around me was equally as scary. So that I think the process between like the realization and the acceptance of it, I would say it's a journey. Have I accepted it now? Yeah, 100%. Like, but it's not all of who I am at this point. I think at those very early stages, that's a big part of who you are because you're feeling that out and learning that about yourself. So I'm 27 now. So I would say around the age of 21, I was sort of okay with saying that I was trans and okay with slowly exploring that with people around me.
Mm-hmm. What was the scariest part about that next step when you had to go tell people, hey, this is me?
I would say probably telling my parents and coming to the point of being like, hey, I have something to tell you. I'm not pregnant. I've never, like, you know me, I've never done anything bad or had anything really big to say in my whole life. In terms of like bombshell things to tell people, I've never had anything like that. So I think telling my mom was huge because I finally had the language to express how I felt to her. But then to realize that I was miles ahead of her, because I had already sort of come to terms with this, and I was expecting her to be on board right away. And for parents, that doesn't happen right away.
How did she react?
She was, like, I think a bit afraid for me in terms of what that looked like and what that meant, whether that meant medical transition or whether that meant socially or what that would look like for me, because life is already hard. And as a parent, I don't think you want your child's life to be difficult.
Yeah, and that's got to be so hard. You know, they've been by your side your whole life, and they've always seen you as their little girl.
Yeah.
And now they have to switch their memories of you and switch how they see you. And they've been by your side since you were born, so that's got to take a while for the gears in their brain to just shift.
Yeah, I think for parents, I'd have to ask my dad, but I think there's a grieving process there for parents. Because suddenly the expectations that you have for your child, and always good intentioned, like, oh, my kid's going to get married and have a husband and have children and do all these things, that you just totally shattered that for them. Which is bittersweet, because for you it's liberation, but for them it's this whole other ball game that they didn't even anticipate. Might I still get married and have a spouse and have children? Yeah, of course, but my dad won't be walking me down the aisle to do that. So I think there's that grieving process too, for parents.
Yeah, and is it fair to say that there has to be some consideration on both sides? I mean, the person coming out as transgender to their parents, you gotta give them a little bit of time and a little bit of leeway to wrap their head around the whole idea of it.
Yeah, I think there has to be some consideration on both sides, because as the person who's transitioning, you can't just, I mean, you want to be selfish because finally you understand this is me, and you want to go full bore and like grab it by the horns and just go. But it's a process for everybody else. They have to catch up. So I think showing some grace and some patience on both sides is huge. And even it's baby steps. Like, I remember asking my mom, we were on vacation. We were in Aruba.
Ooh, I would love to go to Aruba.
I know, me too. Let's go to Aruba. Okay. So we were in Aruba, and I remember waking up being like, yeah, today's the day I'm going to tell my mom that I want her to use he, him pronouns. Like, And that conversation totally floundered and didn't go well. And she was just sort of defensive and taken aback. And I think it's just not something you expect your kid to wake up and sit at the breakfast table and go, hey, so...
In Aruba.
in Aruba. But my mom, we got to the point where, my Christmas presents had my name on them. Oh. And just those little tiny things were huge for me. My dad is totally on board. And it wasn't until last summer that I asked him to use my name and use he, him.
Ah, yes, I remember this. You called me crying. I think it was he either wrote your name on your Christmas card or your birthday card or called you Liam or something. But you were just so happy about it. It was such a huge defining moment for you.
Yeah, it was last Father's Day, I think, that I wrote my card from me. And he said, I love you, Liam, and gave me a hug. And I cried, and he cried, and my stepmom cried. We all just cried. It was great. With my dad, I didn't come out to my dad until I was 22. And I came out to him on my birthday, and we went for dinner.
You just love to pick the special times to come out. On my birthday, in Aruba, on Father's Day.
I really do.
Go big or go home.
Oh, I do.
So let's talk about your name change then.
Yeah.
You used to go by...
Just so you know, don't dead name people.
What does that mean?
So if you dead name people, that means that's like using their old name. People don't like that.
Oh, I had no idea.
So if you're gonna be correct about it, say before you went by Liam.
Ah, okay. Thank you for the correction. At what point did you start going by Liam? What made you pick that name? Tell us a little bit about that process.
That's a very interesting process, and I wasn't exactly at the point where I was totally okay with myself yet. So I was like, okay, well, if I am a guy, I'm gonna maybe pick a name to see if it would be good. Dipping my toe in the water when I'm already knee deep, so to speak. So then, anyone who's named a child, for the record, I have not named a child yet. I have named plants and animals, not children, yet.
You always have great names for them, though.
Thank you. Yes, I do. For anyone that's named a child, they understand that it's so hard to pick a name because that's somebody's life. Mm-hmm. And unless they change their name, that's what they're stuck with their whole life. So imagine having that choice for yourself.
That would be a huge decision.
So for me, I eventually fell on Liam because I wanted something that would allow me to have similar initials to what I had before. And from what I understand from the people I've talked to, most people choose, from my experience, I don't speak for all trans people, but from the people that I know, they've chosen names with the same initial as their old name. And in part, I think that's to do with making the transition easier for other people. Because if your name's like Jessica and you change your name to Sebastian, that's kind of a big change.
Yeah, that's definitely going to take them a lot longer to,
yeah,
have that become second nature.
Yeah. So I think for me, I wanted it to be easier for people. And I also I did the baby name website thing.
Did you?
I did. My previous name meant like victorious. So I wanted something that was like evolving of that, but not the same.
The ultimate victory.
The ultimate. Ugh. Yeah, exactly. So I always really liked William, but I don't like the initial. Like I wouldn't like my initials that way. So I found Liam, which is a derivative of William, if you take it apart, and it means strong-willed warrior.
Nah, that's cute. So earlier, you described being transgender as when you identify as the opposite gender than what was assigned to you at birth. And as somebody who is transgender, you are part of the LGBTQ community. Now, is there a correlation between your gender identity and your sexuality? Can you explain that in depth a little bit?
I like to explain it in the way of the what's called the genderbread man. If you Google this, I did not make this up, but it's a fabulous resource. So it's basically a gingerbread person, and it has three parts. So one is the brain, which is your gender identity, who you inherently feel that you are. And I know who I am on the inside just as much as you know who you are. It's just your inherent, I'm me and I'm male or I'm female or I'm non-binary, any of those. And then there is your heart. So who are you romantically attracted to? Men, women, non-binary people, anyone in between.
Okay.
There's what's between your legs. So not to get confused with like your body parts, but like sexual attraction. So who are you sexually attracted to? Whether it has to do with body parts or how someone identifies, doesn't matter. So there's really no corollary between who you go to bed with and who you go to bed as. Just because someone is trans doesn't mean that they're straight or gay or lesbian or any other sexuality. Like, I can be trans and be straight. I can be trans and be gay.
So I want to go back to talking about coming out and the process of that. We talked a little bit about when you came out to your parents, and I want to understand on a deeper level, what are the fears that come along with coming out to your loved ones? Because I know it took you a long time to come out to me.
I also really didn't tell you.
No, you didn't. I just saw your Instagram name change, positive Liam Forsman, which is very clever. And just texted you and was like, Liam, question mark? And you were like, oh yeah, by the way. So I want you to explain to me, what is that fear that comes along with coming out to your loved ones? Because, I mean, in my opinion, and I'm sure not everybody feels this way, but I'm also sure a lot of people do, it's like, who cares? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that because when you love somebody, you want them to be happy. You want them to thrive. You want them to be confident. You want them to love themselves. So why does it matter what their gender identity is? I just don't understand how this could be a deal breaker for some people who love somebody. But I also understand that these, they're very real fears that people have when they are coming out. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? What made you so scared to come out to me and to come out to your loved ones?
The scariest part was just the fear of rejection, because as someone who's part of the LGBT community, you always hear about the negative aspects of coming out and the negative aspects of owning your identity. You hear about parents kicking their kids out. You hear about violence in relationships. You hear about awful, terrible things that happen to people. So you never really see that being a positive thing. For a lot of people, coming out and owning who they are is dangerous. Not that I felt I was in danger by doing that, but I'm also a very sensitive, emotional person. So I was more worried about rejection from my parents and people around me that I cared most about.
Did you run into that issue with anybody of rejection or, just not being cool with it?
I have a few family members who are just not on board, and that's not something they want to learn about or are open to, and we're at an impasse, and that's fine.
Wow, that's like a huge hurdle to come over. How is the relationship now? How do you deal with that?
The relationship's still fine. It's just there's always that little underline of passive aggression, but that's just the way that it is, and I can't change that, and I can't change another person. So I'm just being me unapologetically, and I'm at the point where, like, if you don't like it, then you don't have to like it. It's not about you. We can disagree on pizza toppings, but not about, like, basic human rights. So
yeah, that's fair.
So it just comes to a point where you go, this is just me and inherently who I am, and I'm happier this way, and I'm living my most authentic version of myself. And if you don't like that, then I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, you've been really fortunate to, besides a couple people, have a supportive group around you who love you and accept you. But what kind of advice would you offer to somebody who isn't in that position, who, needs to come out, wants to come out and be their true selves, but they don't have a supportive group around them? How do you suggest they go about that?
I would say if it's not safe for you to come out, prioritize your safety, physically, mentally, as hard as it is to contain your authentic self once you realize, yep, this is me. If you are not in an environment that is supportive or safe for you to be you, and there could be altercations or violence based on you being your authentic self, don't come out to those people.
And what if it's somebody who just is fearful of an unsupportive family?
Right. If it's just your own fear of coming out, and the people around you seem to be pretty level and okay, I would just have that conversation. It's one of the scariest things you will ever do. I know for me, it's top 5 scariest things I've ever done in my life. But for me, the payoff has been so much greater than the fear. Also, the internet is a great place. There is chosen family. There are so many more people out there than you know that will love and accept you and bolster you and lift you up. You feel like you're alone, you're not by yourself. You're not alone. You're not unlovable. You are worthy of love. People will love you. You will find your tribe and people will accept you for who you are. Once you reach that point of acceptance, then look out, world, because you're gonna do and find great people. So, oh my God, you're gonna do great people.
What?
I said, you're gonna do and find great people.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's all the time we have.
People are like, where? Where do I find these people?
But no, hold up. So, you will find a community of people that is more vast and more diverse and more accepting of you than you could ever imagine. People will lift you up. People will stand beside you, stand behind you to have your back, and stand in front of you cheering you on. So search for them. They're out there, and you will find great people. Better.
Nailed it. And I'm sure you're one of those people. If there's somebody listening to this podcast right now and they need a friend or an ally or a support system or, somebody to do, you'll be there. You'll be that person. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yep.
So we were talking about when you came out to me earlier.
Yes. Or my lack of coming out to you.
Yeah, your lack of coming out to me. And I know that's taken me a long time to get pronouns right. And it's not for lack of trying. It's not because I don't love you. It's just that, honestly, it's just taking a while for the gears to shift in my brain. So how does that make you feel? Not me, but anybody, if they get your pronouns wrong.
Like, at first, I was really offended that people got my pronouns wrong because that was still new for me and it's on the forefront of your mind. So I took it as a personal attack. Like, oh, you don't love me and you're not trying and I hate you and blah, blah, blah. Like, just very angry about it. But I think it has to do, too, with the fact that, yeah, it takes time. Like, people have to make that switch.
So what do you suggest somebody does if they get somebody's pronouns wrong to make it better?
For anyone that's gotten somebody's pronouns wrong, breathe. It's okay. It just depends on how you recover that. So if you have someone who is now using he, him pronouns, and they used to use she, her pronouns, and you're like, oh yeah, my friend, she, he, just keep going. Just correct yourself. Don't make a big deal. Don't stumble and freak out and go, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, because you're just escalating the situation. It's not helpful. We appreciate that you are sorry. It was a mistake. Mistakes happen. But just keep going, because you're going to make that harder for the people.
Yeah, and again, there does need to be some consideration on both sides because your friends love you and they support you, and believe it or not, people come from an honest place of ignorance and just not knowing. So you have to give them the chance to learn.
Like you as a trans person have already accepted this for yourself, so you're expecting everyone else to just be right where you are. And they're not. And that's okay.
I know of a person who was not considerate in the slightest about pronoun or name mishaps, and if you mess something up around them, they're like, bye. And I just find that so unfair for the people learning. And honestly, that person's going to burn a lot of bridges, because if we're going to take the time to shift our vision of you, it's a lot to wrap your head around, and there needs to be some consideration throughout that learning process.
Yeah, of course. And I think there's needs to be some grace and some humility there, and just go, yeah, this is a learning process.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the mental and social aspects of being transgender and of coming out. And I want to talk more about the physical aspects of being transgender. So as you said earlier, being transgender means that you were born into the body of the opposite gender than the one that you identify with. So what are some things that people can do or changes that can be made in order for somebody who is transgender to feel more at home in their body?
So I can only speak to my own experience, and also anecdotally things I've heard from other people or things that I've read, things that I've researched. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any letters behind my name besides BA.
He is a bachelor.
So take it gently. So for people who are transmasculine, like myself, I know for a lot of people, chest dysphoria is a big deal. So like, because you have body parts that you feel shouldn't be there or that you're not comfortable with. So I know for a lot of people, binding, which is like wearing a compression vest to flatten the chest and have a more traditionally masculine looking chest, is helpful. For some people it's about clothing. For some people it's about trying to train their voice to be a certain register. For some people that looks like taking hormones. For some people that looks like having surgery. There's no one way to transition. There's no right way to transition. It's all about what feels right for the individual person. So a lot of people assume that there's this checklist you have to check off being trans. So you're like, okay, I feel this way, so I have to go on hormones. So for someone that's transmasculine, that might look like taking testosterone, which would be hormone replacement, which would replace estrogen and make testosterone your primary hormone, so that you would have these secondary sex characteristics that happen during male puberty, which is your voice deepens, your hairline would recede a little bit, you'd get facial hair, you'd build muscle more easily, you would get growth on certain parts of your body below the belt, and your fat would redistribute to a more typically masculine shape. For other people, that looks like having top surgery, so that looks like, which is actually like a double mastectomy, so having your breast tissue removed so that you have that flat chest. If you feel that hormones would be good for you, then yeah, like, obviously talk to your doctor and have this all medically approved, and don't buy hormones on the black market, because you can do that, and do not do that because that's very dangerous. Honest to God, you can, and it's dangerous.
Well, yeah, anything on the black market is dangerous.
For trans women, you can take estrogen. feminizing hormone. You can have breast augmentation, breast implants.
What are the changes that happen in their body when they take estrogen?
As far as I'm aware, they have some semblance of breast development. Changes also happen below the belt. The skin becomes softer. All those lovely things that happen with...
All those lovely things that happen with being a woman? Because let me tell you, there's not many.
Oh, honey, I know. But yeah, for trans women taking hormones, their body will start to exhibit some secondary sex characteristics that are typical of people who have estrogen as their primary hormone in their body. So for some people, it looks like hormones. Some people, it looks like surgery. Some people don't medically transition at all. And that's okay. Not medically transitioning doesn't invalidate your identity as a trans person. Whatever feels like you or whatever you're the most comfortable with right now, perfectly okay. It just so happens that for a lot of people, that's something that they look into, and that's something that they do.
So there are considerations that people have to make based on how they feel and what they want.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a bit. 20-year-old Liam.
Ew.
Did you just say ew?
Yeah.
What would you say to him? Knowing what you know now, having had come out to your family and to your friends, what advice would you give to 20-year-old Liam? Or anybody who's in the early stages of coming out?
I would say just take a deep breath and don't be afraid to be you. Because you have more inside of you than you know what to do with. And that's okay right now. But you have a lot to offer. And get out of your own head. Go be you instead of thinking about how to be you. Or how to be you in such a way that'll please other people. Or make other people more comfortable around you. Because it's not worth it. You get 0% of the time back that you put in trying to be normal or trying to be anything that you're not. So go be authentically yourself and go live your truth and tell your story because it's a beautiful story and people deserve to hear it. Whether you tell it to them or they just see you living your life, that's a pretty special thing. So just go be.
Oh, man, I knew there was a reason I wanted to have you on the podcast.
# English major.
You're very well put together. So one last question. What do you want people to be more educated on, and what resources would you like to see being made available for people who are transgender?
I'd really like to get beyond the idea that this is a social problem because trans people have existed as long as people have existed. Like, we're not new. And it's not a trend. But I see people complain on the internet all the time. Oh, my kid's gay, or my kid's trans, or exposure to media has made my daughter a man, and all these terrible things people say. It's not that it's a trend. It's not a phase. It's exploratory. They're finding out who they are. And that's a beautiful thing that we should bolster up and encourage, whatever that looks like for anyone, regardless of their sexuality, gender identity, gender expression. I would also love to see more people just out and about in the world living their life and that their identity isn't the main crux of who they are. Because I think for a lot of people in the community, their identity, whether that's who they're attracted to, who they are, who they love, how they love, is a lot on their minds because it comes from a place of fear. So I would really love to see society just get beyond this stigma and this othering of LGBT people. I think for our generation, that's slowly starting to come about, but especially for the generation after us, because they're aware of more than we were when we were in high school. So it's just trickling down, and I think that change is coming.
Well, there you have it, a great educational conversation with Liam Jotham on all things about being trans. We hope this episode has given you more perspective on the lives of people who are transgender and has helped you to learn more about how to be a supportive friend, family member, and ally. If you want to reach out to Liam for any reason, he's full of knowledge, so don't hesitate. You can find him on Instagram under the very clever Instagram handle @PositiveLiamForceman, which will of course be linked in the show notes, along with any references that Liam made throughout the episode. As I said at the beginning of the episode, Mary and I decided to release this episode early in celebration of Pride Month to raise awareness and educate people. Make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're consuming it on, so you'll be notified when we release our next episode. This, along with rates and reviews, also help us to grow the podcast immensely. Any feedback is appreciated so we can make sure that we keep creating things that you want to hear. Thanks for listening, and happy Pride!